They thought it would be the funniest joke of the year when they signed up 17-year-old Autumn Blake for the talent show, expecting the poorest girl in school to humiliate herself in front of everyone. But when she opened her mouth to sing, 300 students fell silent. Teachers stopped breathing, and even the bullies who had orchestrated this cruel prank found themselves wiping away tears they never saw coming. Autumn Blake had perfected the art of being invisible at Westfield High School in Cedar Grove, North Carolina. She slipped through hallways like a shadow, her oversized thrift store sweater hiding the fact that she hadn't grown much since freshman year because proper nutrition was a luxury her family couldn't afford. Her worn canvas shoes, originally white but now a dingy gray, squeaked against the polished floors as she hurried from class to class, always keeping her head down to avoid the stares that followed her everywhere. The trailer park where Autumn lived with her mother, Diane, and 8-year-old brother Connor was 20 minutes outside town, far enough that she had to wake up at 5:30 every morning to catch the earliest bus route. Their single-wide mobile home sat on a lot that flooded whenever it rained hard, surrounded by rusted cars and broken dreams that belonged to families just trying to survive another month. Autumn's mother worked double shifts at the textile factory, her hands permanently stained with dye, and her back bent from years of hunching over industrial sewing machines. Money was always scarce in the Blake household. Autumn had learned to shop at the discount grocery store after 9 p.m., when they marked down the meat that was approaching its expiration date. She knew which churches gave out food boxes on which days of the month, and she had memorized the schedule of every free meal program in their county. Her clothes came from garage sales and church donations, carefully selected to blend in as much as possible, though nothing could hide the reality of her circumstances from classmates who lived in subdivisions with names like Maple Ridge Estates and Willowbrook Manor. At school, Autumn was the target of casual cruelty that teenagers excel at delivering. Brittany Morrison, whose father owned the largest car dealership in 3 counties, would wrinkle her nose whenever Autumn passed by, loudly commenting about mysterious smells to her circle of followers. Jake Richardson, star quarterback and son of the town's most prominent attorney, had once publicly asked if Autumn's family owned their trailer or if they were just squatting in the woods. The laughter that followed his comment had echoed in Autumn's ears for weeks afterward. But the worst part wasn't the obvious bullying. It was a subtle exclusion. The way conversation stopped when she approached, the way group projects somehow always filled up before she could join, the way her teachers looked at her with a mixture of pity and low expectations. Autumn had learned that being poor wasn't just about lacking money. It was about being treated as if you lacked worth, intelligence, and potential. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, routinely suggested vocational programs instead of college prep courses, despite Autumn's straight-A average in every subject. The annual Westfield High Talent Show was scheduled for Friday before Thanksgiving break, a tradition that had evolved into the social event of the fall semester. Students spent weeks preparing elaborate performances, with parents hiring professional choreographers and voice coaches to ensure their children's presentations were polished to perfection. The auditorium would be packed with families, local media, and even representatives from regional colleges who used the event as an informal recruiting opportunity. 3 weeks before the talent show, Autumn was sitting alone in the cafeteria, carefully eating the peanut butter sandwich she had made that morning with the last of their grocery money until her mother's next paycheck. She was reading a library book about marine biology, lost in descriptions of coral reefs and deep ocean creatures, when she heard her name being called from the popular kids' table across the room. Madison Cooper, head cheerleader and daughter of the mayor, was waving enthusiastically in Autumn's direction. For a moment, Autumn looked behind her, certain that Madison must be addressing someone else. But the cheerleader continued gesturing, her smile bright and seemingly genuine as she called out again. Confused and increasingly uncomfortable with the attention, Autumn reluctantly approached the table where Madison sat surrounded by her usual circle of admiring friends. Madison's proposition was delivered with the kind of practiced enthusiasm that comes naturally to people accustomed to getting their way. She explained that they needed more participants for the talent show to make it a proper celebration of school spirit. She had noticed that Autumn never participated in school activities, and wouldn't be wonderful if she could share her hidden talents with the rest of the student body. The other students nodded along, their expressions carefully neutral, as Madison painted a picture of inclusion and community participation that sounded almost believable. What Autumn couldn't see was a text message chain that had been circulating among Madison's friends for the past hour. The messages were filled with laugh-crying emojis and cruel speculation about what kind of disaster performance the trailer park girl might deliver. Someone had suggested it would be hilarious to watch her squirm under the spotlight, while another had proposed taking bets on whether she would actually show up or chicken out at the last minute. To them, Autumn's participation wasn't about inclusion. It was about entertainment at her expense. Autumn's first instinct was to decline politely and retreat to her usual corner of invisibility. She had no talent worth showcasing, no confidence to perform in front of crowds, and certainly no desire to become the center of attention for any reason. But Madison's persistence was impressive, and the promise of being included, even temporarily, in something that mattered to her classmates was more tempting than Autumn wanted to admit, against her better judgment. She found herself nodding agreement, immediately regretting the decision, but unable to take it back without appearing even more pathetic than she already felt. That evening, Autumn sat in her bedroom, which was really just a partitioned section of the trailer's main living area, trying to figure out what she had gotten herself into. She owned no instruments, had no performance experience, and possessed no obvious talents that would translate to a stage presentation. Her mother was working late again, and Connor was asleep on the fold-out couch that served as his bed, leaving Autumn alone with her growing panic about the commitment she had foolishly made. It was then, in the quiet desperation of that moment, that Autumn did something she hadn't done since she was a small child. She began to sing, not loudly, barely above a whisper, but with a clarity and sweetness that seemed to fill the cramped trailer with something approaching magic. She sang Amazing Grace, a hymn her grandmother had taught her years before, back when they still attended the little Baptist church on Elm Street, before money became too tight for the gas required to drive there every Sunday. Her voice, untrained but naturally pure, carried a quality that transcended technical perfection. It was the sound of someone who had experienced real hardship, but had not allowed that hardship to steal their capacity for beauty. Each note seemed to carry the weight of her struggles, while simultaneously offering hope that those struggles were not the end of her story. Without realizing it, Autumn had discovered that years of holding back tears, swallowing pride, and maintaining dignity in the face of constant humiliation had given her voice a depth and authenticity that no amount of professional training could replicate. Over the next 3 weeks, Autumn practiced in secret. She sang while walking the long driveway to catch the school bus each morning, her breath creating small clouds in the increasingly cold November air. She hummed melodies while stocking shelves at Patterson's General Store, where she worked 15 hours a week after school to help with household expenses. She even found herself singing softly while doing homework late at night, using music as a way to focus her mind and calm her constant anxiety about the approaching performance. The cruel irony was that Autumn's classmates had unknowingly discovered something remarkable. Hidden beneath the worn clothes and quiet demeanor was a voice that could have graced concert halls and recording studios, but was a gift that had been buried under years of poverty, neglect, and systematic discouragement from a world that had decided her worth based on her zip code and her family's bank account balance. The night before the talent show, Autumn barely slept. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the water stains on the trailer's ceiling, wondering if it was too late to pretend she was sick and skip school entirely. The rational part of her mind knew she was walking into a trap, that her participation was meant to provide entertainment for people who had never shown her kindness or respect. But another part of her, a part that had been silent for too long, whispered that maybe this was her chance to show them who she really was beneath the surface they had all judged so harshly. Friday afternoon arrived with the inevitability of a natural disaster. Autumn sat through her morning classes in a state of numbness, barely registering the lessons or the excited chatter about that evening's performances. During lunch, she overheard Madison and her friends discussing their expectations of the show, their voices filled with barely contained laughter as they speculated about certain participants who were sure to provide unintentional comedy. Autumn knew they were talking about her, but instead of feeling hurt, she found herself feeling something unexpected: determination. The auditorium was packed by 7 p.m., with students, parents, teachers, and community members filling every available seat. The energy was electric, with professional quality lighting and sound equipment that the drama department had borrowed from the local theater company. Autumn sat in the backstage area, watching through a gap in the curtains as polished performances unfolded one after another. A junior named Ashley Chin played a complex piano piece that earned enthusiastic applause. Twin brothers from the soccer team performed an acrobatic routine that had clearly required months of preparation. Each act was more impressive than the last, making Autumn feel increasingly out of place among performers who belonged in this spotlight. When her name was finally called, Autumn felt as though she was moving through water. Her legs were unsteady as she walked across the stage, and the bright lights made it impossible to see individual faces in the audience, though she could sense hundreds of eyes focused on her slight figure. She had chosen to sing Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, a song that had resonated with her during those late-night practice sessions in the trailer. It was a song about brokenness and redemption, about finding beauty in struggle, and about the complicated relationship between suffering and grace. The opening notes of the accompaniment track filled the auditorium, and Autumn took the deepest breath of her 17 years. When she opened her mouth to sing, something extraordinary happened. The voice that emerged was not the timid whisper her classmates expected, but a sound so pure and powerful that it seemed to originate from somewhere beyond her small frame. Her first word, Hallelujah, rang through the auditorium with a clarity that made people sit up straighter in their seats. As Autumn continued singing, the atmosphere in the room underwent a transformation that no one had anticipated. Students who had been checking their phones or whispering to friends fell completely silent. Parents who had been preparing to politely applaud another student's effort found themselves leaning forward, afraid to miss a single note. Teachers who had written Autumn off as another struggling student from the wrong side of town began to see her with completely different eyes. But it wasn't just the technical quality of Autumn's voice that captured the audience, though her natural talent was undeniable. It was the way she sang each word as if it contained a piece of her soul, the way she transformed a familiar song into something personal and profound. She sang about broken hallelujahs and cold hallelujahs, about love that was both beautiful and devastating, and about finding reasons to praise even when life had given you every reason to despair. In the third row, Brittany Morrison felt tears rolling down her cheeks and couldn't understand why. She had spent 3 years making fun of this girl, treating her like an object of ridicule rather than a human being with feelings and dreams. Now, listening to Autumn's voice soar through verses about enduring despite disappointment, Brittany began to comprehend the cruelty she had casually inflicted on someone whose inner life was apparently far richer than her own. Jake Richardson, who had always prided himself on being tough and emotionally detached, found his hands clenched into fists as he fought back emotions he didn't know he possessed. The girl he had mocked for living in a trailer was standing on that stage delivering a performance that was more honest and powerful than anything he had ever experienced. For the first time in his privileged life, Jake began to understand that worth had nothing to do with wealth, and that he had been living according to a value system that was fundamentally broken. Even Madison Cooper, who had orchestrated this entire situation as an elaborate prank, was struggling with feelings she hadn't anticipated. She had expected to feel superior, amused, and vindicated in her assumptions about social hierarchies. Instead, she felt small and ashamed, recognizing that her actions had been motivated by a cruelty that served no purpose other than to make herself feel more important by diminishing someone else. As Autumn reached the final verse, her voice seemed to grow even stronger, as if the positive energy from the audience was feeding back into her performance. She sang about doing her best despite not feeling much, about standing before the Lord's song with nothing but a broken hallelujah to offer. The metaphor was perfect for her own situation, standing before hundreds of people who had dismissed her, offering nothing but her authentic self and hoping it would be enough. When the last note faded into silence, the auditorium remained completely quiet for what felt like an eternity. Autumn stood center stage, her chest rising and falling from the effort of the performance, unsure whether the silence meant she had succeeded or failed spectacularly. Then someone in the back of the auditorium began to clap, slowly and deliberately, and within seconds the entire room erupted into the kind of standing ovation usually reserved for professional concerts and Broadway shows. But this wasn't just applause, it was something closer to a religious experience. Students who had never spoken to Autumn were on their feet, tears streaming down their faces, applauding not just her voice, but the courage it had taken to stand there and sing her truth. Parents were whispering to each other about the remarkable young woman they had just discovered, wondering how such talent had remained hidden in their small town. Teachers were already making mental notes about scholarship opportunities and vocal programs that might help nurture what they had just witnessed. As Autumn left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by classmates who had never acknowledged her existence before. They weren't offering pity or charity, but genuine respect and admiration for what she had just accomplished. Madison Cooper was the first to reach her, tears in her eyes as she tried to apologize for motivations that now seemed petty and cruel. Jake Richardson waited his turn to tell Autumn that her performance was the most incredible thing he had ever witnessed, his usual arrogance replaced by humility and genuine respect. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about Autumn's performance the following week, with the headline, "Hidden Talent Shines at High School Talent Show." The article included quotes from audience members describing the emotional impact of her performance and speculation about her musical future. But more importantly, it treated Autumn with the dignity and respect she had always deserved, referring to her as a remarkable young artist rather than focusing on her family's economic circumstances. Within a month, Autumn had been contacted by vocal coaches from 3 different universities offering full scholarships. The music director from the regional conservatory drove to Cedar Grove specifically to hear her sing again and left with a recording that he planned to share with colleagues at institutions across the country. What had begun as a cruel joke had transformed into an opportunity that would change not just Autumn's life, but her family's entire trajectory. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in how Autumn saw herself. For 17 years, she had internalized the message that poverty made her lesser, that her circumstances defined her worth, and that dreams were luxuries for people from better families. Standing on that stage, sharing her voice with people who had dismissed her, she discovered that talent doesn't require permission from those who consider themselves superior. Authenticity doesn't need to be validated by people who mistake privilege for merit. And sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person everyone assumed had nothing important to say. The following spring, Autumn graduated as valedictorian of her class, delivering a speech that focused on the danger of making assumptions about people based on external circumstances. She talked about the gifts that remain hidden when we judge others too quickly, and the opportunities we miss when we let prejudice blind us to potential. Her classmates, many of whom were hearing her speak publicly for the first time despite sharing classes for 4 years, gave her another standing ovation. Today, Autumn Blake performs at venues across the country, her voice carrying the same authentic power that first silenced that auditorium in Cedar Grove. But she never forgot the lesson of that November evening, and she uses her platform to advocate for students from low-income families, ensuring that financial circumstances don't become barriers to artistic education and opportunity. She established a scholarship fund specifically for talented students from trailer parks, rural communities, and other places where dreams are often considered impractical luxuries. Autumn's story reminds us that extraordinary talent often exists in the most unexpected places, hidden beneath circumstances that have nothing to do with a person's true worth or potential. It teaches us that the quiet kid in the corner might possess gifts that could change the world, if only someone takes the time to look beyond surface judgments and economic stereotypes. Most importantly, it proves that when we finally find the courage to share our authentic selves with the world, even those who meant to laugh at us might find themselves transformed by what they discover. The girl they nominated as a joke became the voice that taught an entire community about the difference between hearing and truly listening, between looking and actually seeing, and between judging and understanding. Sometimes the greatest performances come not from those who have been given every advantage, but from those who have learned to create beauty despite having every reason to remain silent.